Clock at the White House, where the president says he never worked for Russia after back-to-back bombshell reports about the American president and Vladimir Putin. Now Democrats are demanding to hear from an interpreter who was in the room with the two leaders. And the longest-running government shutdown in American history is now in week 4. We'll get the latest on the standoff as major airports close down security checkpoints. Reporting begins now.
Now, Shepard Smith reporting live from the Fox News deck.
And good Monday afternoon. The President of the United States says he never worked for Russia. An extraordinary statement from an American president. The denial comes after reports in the New York Times and in the Washington Post. The Times reports the FBI actually investigated whether President Trump was secretly working on behalf of the Kremlin. Today, the president pushed back.
I never worked for Russia, and you know that answer better than anybody. I never worked for Russia. Not only did I never work for Russia, I think it's a disgrace that you even asked that question, because it's a whole big fat hoax. It's just a hoax.
And the Washington Post reporting that President Trump has gone to extraordinary lengths to conceal his closed-door conversations with Vladimir Putin. According to the reporting of the Post, President Trump took away the interpreter's notes and told the interpreter, do not discuss what was said, even with senior U.S. officials. So nobody has a direct recount of what happened in that meeting. The White House suggesting the president was trying to prevent leaks. But Democrats now control the House, and they have the power to investigate, which they are. The new Democratic chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff, is talking about possibly having President Trump's interpreter testify on Capitol Hill. All of this is threatening to overshadow the ongoing government shutdown, now the longest in the nation's history, and with no deal in sight to end it. Our chief White House correspondent John Roberts reporting live from the North Lawn.
Shep, good afternoon to you. President Trump's first response to the New York Times report was 9 o'clock on Saturday night on Fox News with Judge Jeanine, in which the president told Judge Jeanine that that question was the most ludicrous thing he has ever been asked. But his critics pointed out, well, he didn't deny it. He didn't say no. So today, the president did forcefully deny it, at the same time pointing to the people who were in charge of the investigation at the time that inquiry was launched, people like Andrew McCabe, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, Bruce Orr, and others. Listen to what the president said.
I guess they started it because I fired Comey, which was a great thing I did for our country. So the people doing that investigation were people that have been caught that are known scoundrels. I guess you could say they're dirty cops.
Now, according to Texas Congressman John Ratcliffe, whose questioning of FBI General Counsel James Baker uncovered the fact that there was an inquiry going on, at that time, according to Ratcliffe, political bias had infected senior FBI leadership and emotion, not evidence, was driving their decision-making. But some Democrats say the revelation that the FBI even opened an inquiry into what President might have been up to at the time, potentially engaged in un-American activities, according to FBI officials, on behalf of Russia, was a good reason to keep the Mueller investigation going to its logical conclusion. Listen to Chris Coons here.
There's been a confusing and at times even alarming tendency on the part of President Trump to compliment President Putin. That's led many of us to question his closeness to and his affinity for President Putin.
Now let's go to that Washington Post report, too, about the president going to, quote, extraordinary lengths to try to keep the details of his one-to-one meetings, or face-to-face meetings, rather, with President Vladimir Putin away from the eyes of other senior administration officials. The president in the South Lawn today said, look, I have these bilateral meetings with leaders all the time. This one is no different. And we should point out, too, Shep, that it wasn't just President Trump and President Putin and their interpreters. Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia, was there, and so was Rex Tillerson, who was Secretary of State at the time. Rex Tillerson certainly has not been shy as of late in his criticism of President Trump, and so far he has not said that anything was amiss during that July 2017 meeting in Hamburg with Vladimir Putin. Shep?
John, give us an update on what the president said about the shutdown, if you could.
Well, it doesn't look like the shutdown is any closer to ending today than it was last week. The president, addressing the Farm Bureau in New Orleans just a few minutes ago, said that he is not about to back down. Listen here.
When it comes to keeping the American people safe, I will never, ever back down. I didn't need this fight. This is a rough fight. We're dealing against people who think that if they can stop me from building the wall, again, we've already done a lot of work, but they think that's a good thing for 2020 because they're not going to win.
The president spent the weekend talking with Republican lawmakers, trying to make sure that none of them go squishy on all of this. The president believes that the longer this goes on, Democrats will eventually cave from the pressure. A new ABC News Washington Post poll shows that opposition to the border wall is beginning to erode somewhat, though other polls show that the president is getting the blame for the shutdown. The president also said this morning, as he was leaving the White House, that he has shelved the idea, at least for the time being, of declaring a national emergency to build the wall. Listen here.
I'm not looking to call a national emergency. This is so simple, you shouldn't have to. Now, I have the absolute legal right to call it, but I'm not looking to do that because this is too simple. The Democrats should say we want border security, we have to build a wall, otherwise you can't have border security, and we should get on with our lives.
After saying very publicly in the Oval Office with Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi that he would gladly accept blame for a government shutdown, the president now pinning the blame for federal employees not getting their paychecks on the Democrats. But Shep, so far no indication whatsoever that the Democrats are feeling any kind of heat and are getting ready to cave.
John Roberts, live on the lawn. Thanks. Let's check in on Congress. They're back to work now. Our senior producer for Capitol Hill is Chad Pergram. Chad, has anybody there noted movement toward the possibility of some sort of agreement that might reopen the government?
None at all, Shep, and that's what's so unique here. Usually when we get into these situations, there's a lot of backroom dealing, there's weekend sessions, late night, they're trading paper. None of that, and I've talked to old-time Capitol Hill hands here who are just confounded by that because they've never seen a situation where you have a crisis that goes on as long as this one has and not really have any true negotiations. That's a problem here on Capitol Hill. It's very strange. I talked to one senior Republican congressman earlier today who indicated to me that they thought that things were going to get worse before they get better. Now, Benny Thompson is the chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee, Democrat from Mississippi. And in the past 30 minutes or so, he's put out a statement here about aviation security and these long lines at the airport. And Thompson says, quote, it could have a negative impact on aviation security. In other words, if they don't start to work this out. This is a real problem, Shep, when they're not talking. You know, JFK in his inauguration speech in 1961 said you shouldn't be afraid to negotiate. Well, they can't get to any resolution, any compromise if they're not negotiating, Shep.
What about anything from the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell? He's the one who in the past has said, I'm the one who gets you out of shutdowns. Any luck?
Right. And that's what a lot of people also have been confounded by here. Mitch McConnell is one of those folks who has this really good inside game. He's really good, you know, in working out deals with the other side. And he has virtually fallen silent. He's been very critical of the Democrats here, but he hasn't, you know, taken some of these bills that the House of Representatives passed last week. In another universe, he might try to do that and say, OK, let's try to amend these bills. Let's try to alter them and get to 60 votes to clear a filibuster on a cloture vote or something like that. None of that has happened. It's just been in a stasis. Here's the other problem for the United States Senate, Shep. Tomorrow, William Barr, the Attorney General nominee, has his first confirmation hearing. It's going to be a couple of days of confirmation hearings. We don't see the Senate moving at all. They're going to take a procedural vote for a third time later this afternoon just to get onto a bill that deals with supporting Israel and trying to sanction Syria. It failed on 2 different occasions last week. They can't even get onto the bill. They need 60 votes to do that. We expect a similar vote later today, and it's all because nobody is willing to deal on this government shutdown.
Wow. Thanks very much. Appreciate it, Chad Pergram, as always. President Trump's pick to lead the Justice Department is about to get a grilling. Senators are set to ask the Attorney General nominee, William Barr, a lot of questions at his confirmation hearing that begins tomorrow. But as it turns out, we already know the first things he's going to say, including what he'll do about the Mueller investigation. That's coming up as reporting continues on this Monday afternoon. The president's pick for Attorney General William Barr says it is vitally important that Robert Mueller be allowed to finish his investigation into Russian interference and that the results should be public. That's according to prepared testimony released before his confirmation hearing starts tomorrow. Democrats expect to question Barr about a memo that he sent to the Justice Department last year in which he criticized the special counsel's investigation. Catherine Herridge reporting live from Washington. Hi, Catherine.
Well, Shep, also in these prepared remarks, the president's nominee to be attorney general says he is committed to making the Mueller report public. Reads in part, quote, "My goal will be to provide as much transparency as I can consistent with the law. I can assure you that where judgments are to be made by me, I will make those judgments based solely on the law and will let no personal, political, or other improper interests influence my decision." As you noted last week, he was up on Capitol Hill to prep for the confirmation hearings, and Barr was pressed on how he will handle the special counsel report after he sent this unsolicited memo to the Deputy Attorney General last summer, concluding that any obstruction case by the special counsel targeting the president was not legal. Here's Senate Democrat Chris Coons.
I asked about his intention to either recuse himself or seek an opinion from the Ethics Council at the Department of Justice and whether he would follow that regardless of the advice or outcome.
Committee's chairman, Lindsey Graham, said he's had assurances from Barr about the special counsel, among other issues.
Are you committed to making sure Mr. Mueller can finish his job? Yes. When the report's handed over to you, what do you intend to do with it? Go through the process of what I can share with the Congress and the public, erring on the side of transparency.
The hearings start up bright and early tomorrow morning, and they're scheduled over a 2-day period, Shep.
And questioning to go beyond the special counsel.
That's right. In a statement, the ACLU told Fox News that they believe Barr laid the foundation for government surveillance programs, and they want senators to press the nominee for his position on two big topics: warrantless surveillance and mass data collection programs.
They have to vigorously question him about his views on executive power, on what he thinks the limits of the president's power are, and how he will defend the Fourth Amendment. You know, whether he will really scale back surveillance programs that we know raise significant constitutional and privacy concerns.
The ACLU also says that the DEA began mass data collection as we know it today on Barr's watch as Attorney General. Shep.
Catherine Herridge live on Capitol Hill. Action against Iran. Ahead, what President Trump's team reportedly requested and how the Pentagon responded. Plus, the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, meeting with the Saudi leader accused of ordering the killing of the Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi. So what went down there when Secretary Pompeo spoke with the Crown Prince, the day-to-day leader of the country? That's coming up. Pentagon officials were shocked when President Trump's national security team asked them to come up with options for a military strike against Iran. That's what former U.S. national security official told Fox News. The Wall Street Journal first reported this development. The parent companies of the Journal and Fox News share common ownership. Pentagon officials pushed back on the president's people's request and expressed concern that a military strike could lead to an all-out war with Iran. But they did provide military options as requested to the National Security Council. Jennifer Griffin reporting live from her post at the Pentagon.
Shep, according to a former U.S. national security official who I spoke to today, National Security Advisor John Bolton and his deputy at the time, Mira Ricardel, told the Pentagon to come up with military options to strike Iran and respond after suspected Iranian-backed Shia militias fired 3 mortars near the American embassy in Baghdad in early September. No one was injured in the strike, which U.S. military officials at the time told us fell very short of the target. The attack missed the embassy. Iranian-backed militias also fired on the U.S. consulate in Basra in late September, forcing the U.S. consulate there to close temporarily. Shep.
Jennifer, what else have we heard from the Pentagon on this?
Well, according to a senior former U.S. defense official with knowledge of the preparations, the Pentagon was asked to prepare to strike Iran. Quote, the department was concerned, I'm told, that one senior participant in the National Security Council deputies meeting chaired by Ricardel was, quote, shocked and dismayed by the request. Former Defense Secretary Jim Mattis, joined by Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, quote, resisted the request and ultimately prevailed. The Pentagon did provide military options to the National Security Council, as you mentioned, but Mattis tried to manage expectations as to what they would entail. Officially, this is the statement released by Pentagon spokesman Colonel Rob Manning today. The Department of Defense is a planning organization and provides the president military options for a variety of threats, routinely reviewing and updating devastating plans and activities to deal with a host of threats, including those posed by Iran, to deter and, if necessary, to respond to aggression. Ultimately, the U.S. did not respond militarily. White House officials tell Fox the Pentagon and State Department were not caught off guard by the request. NSC spokesman Garrett Markey added, quote, the NSC coordinates policy and provides the president with options to anticipate and respond to a variety of threats. We continue to review the status of our personnel following attempted attacks on our embassy in Baghdad and our Basra consulate, and will consider the full range of options to preserve their safety and our interests. Shepard.
Jennifer, thank you. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says the Trump administration expects Saudi officials to hold accountable every single person involved in the murder of the Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi. He made that comment after meeting with the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. A U.S. intelligence assessment actually blames that same Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman for ordering the killing. Now, Saudi officials have denied this. And then when a reporter asked the Secretary Pompeo about it, like whether when he says everybody responsible, he includes the one that our security teams say is absolutely responsible, he wouldn't comment. Lawmakers have urged the administration to punish Saudi Arabia for Khashoggi's brutal death and demanded the United States pull back its support for the Saudi-led war in Yemen. Trey Yingst reporting live from our Mideast newsroom.
Shep, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo wrapped up his 8-country tour of the Middle East today in Oman after major meetings this morning in Saudi Arabia with both King Salman and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Now, speaking with reporters after those discussions, Pompeo said that both Saudi leaders acknowledged the need for accountability in the death of Jamal Khashoggi. Pompeo added that they talked about the investigation currently taking place in Saudi Arabia regarding the killing of this journalist in Turkey last year. Critics have noted the investigation is being overseen by those who were reportedly involved in the murder. Pompeo also discussed with Saudi leadership the civil war in Yemen. Afterwards, the U.S. Embassy in Saudi Arabia tweeted out that Pompeo and the Crown Prince had agreed on their continued need for de-escalation in Yemen. Now, Shep, it's important to note that this statement failed to mention that Saudi Arabia has been accused of killing thousands of civilians over the past 4 years in this civil war backed by the United States, and they are still continuing airstrikes within Yemen. Shep?
And Secretary Pompeo talked about the relationship with Turkey as well, right?
He did, Shep. He talked about the relationship between Turkey and the United States. This does come after Turkey has not promised the United States that they would protect Kurdish forces. Pompeo said that that will not affect Trump's decision to pull U.S. troops out of Syria, a decision that he made late last year. We also know that he was asked about President Trump's tweet saying that attacking the Kurds would lead to economic devastation for Turkey. Pompeo declined to fully answer that question, saying the reporter who asked the question would have to ask Trump. Now, Pompeo's comments do come as the White House has confirmed that Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan and President Trump spoke on the phone today, Shep. They talked about military cooperation in Syria and also the protection of those Kurdish fighters. Shep?
Trey Yingst reporting live from Jerusalem. A class full of kids can get pretty rowdy with a substitute teacher up in there. Now imagine that there's a substitute teacher in every classroom, in every public school, in all of the second largest school district in the country. We'll see how that's going. Plus, some trouble with the TSA. It's mounting as the partial government shutdown causes long lines at some big airports. Reporting continues next.
Privatizers take the hike. Education is a right.
Further news, it rained in Los Angeles. Members of the teachers union walked off the job for the first time in 30 years. They've been trying to reach a deal on issues including higher wages and smaller class sizes, but no luck. District officials say the union's demands could bankrupt the school system. So now, substitute teachers are crossing the picket lines to teach more than 500,000 kids. Jonathan Hunt reporting live from L.A.
Shep, winter rainstorms are almost as rare as teachers' strikes here in Los Angeles, but today we got both. But despite the intense rain today, thousands of teachers turned out first this morning at around 7 a.m. to picket schools all across the LAUSD school district. Then they rallied here in downtown LA. Tens of thousands by early estimates actually gathered here along with other supporters and a lot of students to make their voice heard. What the teachers say they want is better pay, they want smaller class sizes, and they want more nurses, counselors, and librarians to be placed in schools. Listen here.
Here we are in a fight for the soul of public education. The question is, do we starve our public neighborhood schools so that they are cut and privatized? Or do we reinvest in our public neighborhood schools for our students and for a thriving city?
And teachers say, Shep, that they will be back at it tomorrow, striking once again. We expect to hear more from them at a news conference in just a couple of hours' time, Shep.
Hey, what's the latest from the school district officials, Jonathan?
Interestingly, school district officials have been very quiet today, Shep, other than giving advice to parents saying that their children will be looked after if they send them to school. But you've got about 2,000 substitute teachers replacing 31,000 LAUSD teachers. So you can imagine the student to teacher ratio not good enough for a lot of parents. So a lot of parents have been keeping their kids out of school. But the district says, as for meeting the teachers' demands, it's just unaffordable. Listen here.
Cannot afford everything they're asking for. So we're hoping they'll come to the table and tell us what they really want, because they can't have everything they're asking for. We know that, they know that.
And Shep, there has been no sign of any renewed offers from either side today. And this strike, if these two sides cannot get together, could drag on for days, even weeks. Shep?
Jonathan Hunt reporting live from Los Angeles. Passengers say it's taking more than an hour to get through some security checkpoints in Atlanta, at the busiest airport in the country, in fact, in the world. The TSA reports the number of no-shows across the country is up today, the first business day since workers missed their first paychecks because of the partial government shutdown, or both. Jonathan Seri is reporting. He's live at Hartsfield-Jackson. Jonathan?
Hi, Shep. Well, this afternoon, the lines are much more manageable than they were earlier today. But take a look at this video from this morning. You had long lines of passengers extending from the TSA checkpoint where I'm standing, going into the main atrium, basically this giant food court in the middle of the main terminal, and then extending into the baggage claim area. In Houston, TSA staffing issues are still affecting George Bush Intercontinental Airport. The ticket counter and security checkpoint of Terminal B are closed, so passengers have to check in and get screened in neighboring terminals before working their way to departures out of Terminal B. Over the weekend, Miami International Airport had to close its Concourse G because of a temporary shortage of TSA screeners. The concourse is back open today, but airport officials say they and the TSA are closely monitoring staffing levels at checkpoints and will make adjustments as necessary. Nationally, 7.6% of TSA employees have taken unscheduled absences today. That's more than double the unscheduled absent rate reported on Monday of the same week a year ago. But Shep, this TSA says that it's actively managing efforts to essentially pool the employees that it has in strategic areas so that safety is not compromised. Shep?
What's the agency saying about a security issue there today?
Yeah, they have acknowledged, they have confirmed that earlier this month there was a passenger who was able to board an international flight to Tokyo with a firearm in their carry-on luggage. The TSA issued a statement saying TSA has determined standard procedures were not followed, and a passenger did in fact pass through a standard screening TSA checkpoint with a firearm at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport on January 2. TSA will hold those responsible appropriately accountable. What happened, Shep, is the passenger apparently forgot that they had placed this firearm in their carry-on and then noticed it sometime during the flight and then immediately notified Japanese authorities upon arrival in Tokyo. The TSA says that this incident had nothing to do with staffing levels as a result of the government shutdown. However, Politico is reporting that last week the TSA had to cancel training classes for more than 300 employees as a result of cutbacks from the partial government shutdown, Shep.
Jonathan Seri at the airport in Atlanta. The president is heading back to Washington after that quick trip to New Orleans to promote his trade policies to farmers. He spoke at the annual convention of the American Farm Bureau Association. Some farmers have said their businesses are struggling after China slapped new tariffs on U.S. agricultural products last summer. Soybeans, a particular problem. It was retaliation from the U.S. imposing tariffs on Chinese products. The Fox Business Network's Deirdre Bolton reporting. She's live in New Orleans. Deirdre?
I certainly am, Shep. And earlier you had this whole room filled with ranchers and farmers. You just mentioned soybeans. This is the U.S.'s biggest agri-export. If you look during the past 5 years, $19 billion worth of that crop on average is what we exported. But thanks to these U.S.-China trade tariffs, we have competition. Brazil producing more and more. China actually buying a lot from Brazil, buying a lot from Argentina. So I did speak with one farmer, and he's in Illinois. He has 5,000 acres, Shep. Most of that is soybeans. And I asked him how he thought that the president and the administration was doing. He actually remains cautiously optimistic. He said that he is happy that President Trump is taking such a stance against China. And he said for this year, thanks to government subsidies, that he has been made whole by the U.S. government. But he did say he does hope that the president and the administration does continue to talk with the Chinese, does continue to sit down with them. And he said, obviously, I want them to keep talking and I want them to make a deal. So you do have some cautious optimism here, Shep, but most of the president's 45-minute speech, thunderous applause at numerous moments. Shep?
Deirdre Bolton reporting live from New Orleans. A federal judge has blocked a Trump administration rule that would allow more employers to opt out of offering free contraceptive coverage on moral and religious grounds. That rule goes into effect today, but a group of states had sued to stop it. They asked for a national injunction. They didn't get it. The judge is limiting his ruling to the 13 states and the District of Columbia that actually sued. They're marked on your screen here. They argue that the Trump rule violates the Affordable Care Act, which requires most employers to offer contraception at no cost to women. Religious organizers are already exempt from that, but the Trump administration is trying to let more companies qualify. It released a statement on the ruling saying no American should be forced to violate his or her own conscience in order to abide by the laws and regulations governing the healthcare system. Court documents reveal new details in the case of the kidnapped teenager Jamie Kloss. What we're learning about the suspect, how investigators say he made up his mind to take her, and what prosecutors say about the conditions she was living in as he held her captive for 88 days. All the new details live from the courthouse next. Get on a school bus one day. Never seen her before. And right before he killed Jamie's mom, he told her to tape up her own daughter's mouth. That's according to a newly released criminal complaint. The suspect is this man, Jake Patterson. He's scheduled for his first court appearance within the hour. According to prosecutors, and this is new, after he grabbed Jamie Kloss, he kept her hidden under a bed for hours at a time and warned her that bad things could happen to her if anybody found her. Prosecutors say he broke into the Kloss family home in Wisconsin back in October when he blew open the door with a shotgun. He shot Jamie's parents, then taped Jamie's hands and feet, and drove her to a remote cabin about an hour away. You can see the distance here. Last week, Jamie escaped from that cabin wearing a pair of her captor's shoes. Now we're getting a look inside that cabin at the dirty basement where police say Patterson may have kept her for nearly 3 months. These images from the Daily Mail. You can see stuffed animals on the bed and trash all over the place. Matt Finn is live at the courthouse in Barron, Wisconsin, north and east of Minneapolis.
Shep, very disturbing details to this case this afternoon. First, police say that Patterson admitted to killing James and Denise Kloss so he can get his hands on their 13-year-old daughter. The criminal complaint that was just released also indicates that Patterson went to great lengths to pull off this crime, that he even used a particular shotgun that he thought would help avoid him being detected. A portion of the criminal complaint just released this afternoon reads, the defendant stated he selected this particular gun because he had done research and knew that the Mossberg brand shotgun was one of the most heavily likely manufactured her own shotguns and knew it would be difficult to trace. Patterson also switched out license plates on his getaway car. The criminal complaint reads in part, the defendant stated he stole license plates because he did not want to get stopped or spotted with his own license plates. He stopped on a side road somewhere near east of Barron and removed both the front and rear license plates from his car and placed the stolen license plates on the rear of his car. Police say Patterson also shaved his head and face and put on a black ski mask to avoid leaving behind DNA hair on the scene. According to police, Patterson went to the Kloss house 2 times before October 15th, but backed off because there were lights on or many cars in the driveway. The third and final time, early in the morning of October 15th, Patterson found the Kloss house dark and decided it was time to strike. Shep.
And more details from investigators about how the suspect hid her in the house for so long?
Yeah, the criminal complaint reads that Patterson made Jamie go underneath his bed anytime that he had people over, and he stuffed laundry bins with weights on them against the base of his bed to hide her and make it difficult for her to move those laundry bins. And then he would close the door and play music inside of his bedroom to avoid any noises that she might make being detected. She stayed in this house for up to 3 months until this brave young girl successfully made a run for it last Thursday and into the safety of neighbors.
And right now, in all, it looks like PG&E is facing 750 lawsuits. Shep?
Susan Lee from the New York Stock Exchange. The British Prime Minister Theresa May making back-to-back speeches and an 11th hour pitch to try to save her deal on Brexit. Parliament will vote on the plan tomorrow, less than 3 months before the UK is scheduled to leave the European Union. The British Prime Minister warning that if lawmakers don't back the deal, it could be catastrophic for their democracy. Senior Foreign Affairs correspondent Greg Palcott reporting. He's live in London tonight.
Shep, you have it. It is absolutely make or break time for UK Prime Minister Theresa May and her plan for Britain to exit the European Union, otherwise known as Brexit. She appeared before the House of Commons today, as well as her Conservative Parliament members. She argued that her plan delivers on a 2016 vote by the British public to leave the European Union and also avoid some nastier possibilities by a March 29 deadline. Listen to the reception she got today.
When the history books are written, people will look at the decision. People will look at the decision of this House tomorrow and ask, did we deliver on the country's vote to leave the European Union?
You thought U.S. politics was tough. This vote was actually planned for last month. It was yanked because the folks didn't think they had enough votes. It might not have enough votes tomorrow either. Pro and anti-European Union activists are not happy with it. If voted down, the Prime Minister will have to come up with Plan B by next week. And if and when that fails, there could be another deal, no deal, another referendum, or another general election. President Trump has already given his opinion on May's plan. He thinks it doesn't go far enough to separate the UK from the European Union. Likewise, though, most people think that chaos in one of our most important allies is not a good thing either. One more option.
The knife in the air right after it happened. Investigators in Poland say the knife ripped through the mayor's heart and abdomen. Benjamin Hall reporting live tonight from London.
Yeah, hi, Shep. We're also learning more about the killer who carried out this brutal murder and who carried it out in front of thousands of people and at a charity event to raise money for a children's hospital. We know now that he was aligned with far-right groups, and he even told the crowd there why he'd done it, running up to the front of the stage before
Extreme weather alert from the Rocky Mountains to the nation's capital as millions of Americans dig out of a deadly winter storm across much of the country. Officials blaming that storm for several deaths, including that of an Illinois state trooper killed while responding to a crash outside Chicago. Highways and roadways icy and treacherous. And take a look at this sand truck that slid off a road and flipped over in Fairfax County, Virginia. That's just outside D.C. Forecasters are now warning there could be a second round of snow coming. Meteorologist Adam Klotz reporting live from the Extreme Weather Center. I just got an alert from the New York Post saying we could get a foot around here.
Yeah, another big round of storms. So the one you were just talking about, that's moved off to the Atlantic. We're about to see rounds and rounds now enter the West Coast, and that's going to sweep across the country in the week ahead. Here's what we're currently looking at: winter storm watches and warnings across portions of Southern California. But this is just one round. It is going to be several. We already have the warnings in place. These are going to continue to come. Here's your future radar, and you can pay attention to it. One round heading into the middle of the country, a second round on Tuesday, a third big round running in on Wednesday. So this is going to be a several round system, and some of these really packing a big punch, particularly there on the West Coast. Again, these will all kind of load up and then work their way into the middle of the country, sweeping across the Midwest, eventually here to the East Coast. But for the West Coast, at least the next couple of days, that's the immediate threat. You're looking at areas getting up to, in Southern California, 6 to 8 inches of possible rain. Same is going to be the case in Northern California, Shep. So pretty much across the country, we're paying attention to this winter-like weather.
Adam Klotz in the Extreme Weather Center, thank you. It's next weekend for the big cities in the Northeast.